weekend. Let's get some analysis then from Bill Bowkett, reporter at reaction.life, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK. Good morning, Bill.
Morning, Callum.
And I suppose the follow-up to this from a UK point of view is really whether enough is being done for the people who are trying to get out of Ukraine. Let's start there. Do you think we are doing enough to help those who are fleeing?
Well, Boris Johnson over the weekend published his 6-point plan in the New York Times to bring further support, or to call for further support for the people of Ukraine. In particular, focus is around support for non-NATO members neighbouring Ukraine in places like Moldova and Georgia. Also taking further action on Russian banks, and also for Western countries to mobilise humanitarian aid and also defence. But there have also been deep questions about whether the government is actually going far enough, at least in response to the crisis. There's different angles. You've got the refugee argument, in that only 50 visas to refugees have been offered when there's been over 15,000 applications. And then you've also got this economic crime bill, which is being voted in the House of Commons later, which many critics, Labour MPs and also some Tory backbenchers say that it's not strong enough because of the 6 months transition period which occurs, which some critics say will enable Putin-backed oligarchs to sell and move their assets in that period that they're being investigated.
Just on the refugees and applications, I mean, yes, you're right, 50 Ukrainians have been granted visas under the scheme. The BBC reports that about 1% of the 5,535 people who have applied. But I think in terms of the total number, it's about nearly 12,000 applications as of 10 o'clock yesterday morning, and about 5,500 had completed those applications. That is 50 Ukrainians up against the 1 million who have arrived in Poland since this conflict began.
Yeah, it's fascinating looking at a country like Poland. It seems to have kind of changed its stance, and it's opened its doors to Ukrainian refugees suffering so much under the siege of Vladimir Putin. And now that's been heightened on the United Kingdom, in that, well, why are they not going far enough? So first of all, they were to say that actually it's only immediate family members that would be offered sanctuary in the UK. But amid further criticism and despite rebuttals from ministers, particularly Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, that essential security checks will still have to take place, the government are looking to relax and waive visas and create a humanitarian route for thousands of Ukrainian refugees that are having to leave their country because of the siege of Vladimir Putin.
Well, what do you make of Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland's tweet on this? This just isn't good enough. 1.5 million people already displaced from Ukraine. There is a desperate need for the UK to step up. We must let people in, as other countries are doing, and deal with paperwork afterwards. Is that a viable position to kind of just, I suppose, open the border and let people in and deal with the bureaucracy of that afterwards?
Well, yeah, I think there is a little bit of a concern of just simply opening the borders and allowing Ukrainian refugees to come in, because, as I mentioned, that there are essential security checks that still have to take place, and you know, security-wise, Europe is in a very vulnerable situation. And actually, for many Ukrainian refugees, they're not actually looking to find a new home in the United Kingdom, but they're in fact staying in neighbouring countries like Lithuania, Albania, and particularly Poland, because their hope is that once this war has finished and Vladimir Putin retreats from his quote, you know, peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, that they can finally return home and rebuild from the damage that's been caused.
I want to ask as well, so just on sanctions then, let's turn to sanctions, because the kind of headline on this in the Times, PM's vow to Zelensky, I'll push West for even more sanctions on Russia. Boris Johnson will push for Western allies to take more action on sanctions and offer greater military assistance after being warned that Russia is preparing a huge assault on Kyiv. Is it a little bit rich of the Prime Minister to say, I'm going to push the West, when arguably, in terms of sanctions, the UK has been a little bit slow and really been criticised, particularly for things like delays on really sanctioning oligarchs, for example, which I know it is going to bring forward legislation on today. But it's just, I don't know, it just seems a little bit rich almost for the PM to be saying, well, I'm going to push for other people to go further, faster, when actually he's been facing a lot of criticism for his tardy response.
You're absolutely right, Callum, and I think the Prime Minister is taking quite a liberal internationalist view during this crisis and saying that warm platitudes about rule-based international order is over, and he even accused, for instance, America when he had a meet, when speaking to Antony Blinken, the United States Secretary of State, of America being inert during this crisis. But actually, even though the Prime Minister is proposing this 6-point plan, also $100 million extra dollars directly to the Ukrainian government's lethal assistance, and also the economic crime bill. Again, the big call lands amid questions domestically over influence of British democracy, like you said, on oligarchs. So in this morning's Daily Mail, we have a story about 100 oligarchs sanctioned by the European Union and the United States, but not by Britain. And as I said, also, there's questions, particularly over this economic crime bill, that would target those oligarchs. Because now there's an amendment that's successfully won cross-party support from the Conservative backbencher David Davis that would freeze the assets while that 6-month transition period, which is seeming to cause the biggest problems. And I remember it was a big sticking point during Prime Minister's questions with Sir Keir Starmer criticising the government's response. So, yeah, I can see why people would think that it's a bit rich of Boris Johnson to make many of these claims, trying to stand and, on the world stage. And yes, Britain has taken, I would say, a decisive role during the crisis in Ukraine. But his actions need to be matched by what he's saying to foreign leaders.
Bill, really interesting to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. That is Bill Bowkett, reporter at reaction.life, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK.